Dear Ray, at 55 years old, I was told I was too old for the promotion I'd earned after 20 years of loyalty. They gave my dream job to a 28-year-old with zero experience who called my ideas boomer marketing. 6 months later, I was sitting in my own corner office as CEO of the company that had just stolen 70% of their business. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is proving them catastrophically wrong. Hit like if you believe age is just a number, and get ready for a masterclass in strategic thinking that will restore your faith in justice. Ray, I need you to understand who I was before this story begins, because it makes what happened next so much more powerful. My name is Margaret, and for 20 years, I had been the backbone of Peterson Marketing. Not just an employee, the backbone. I started there when I was 35, fresh from a messy divorce, desperately needing stability for my teenage daughter. Peterson was a scrappy little firm with big dreams and bigger debts. I wasn't just hired as a marketing coordinator. I became the person who kept the lights on, who sweet-talked vendors when payments were late, who worked weekends and holidays to make sure every campaign exceeded expectations. Over 2 decades, I watched Peterson grow from a team of 8 people crammed into a converted warehouse to a regional powerhouse with 150 employees and a gleaming downtown office. And Ray, I wasn't just there for the ride, I was driving the bus. I built relationships with every major client in the city. When Peterson pitched new business, clients would specifically ask, "Will Margaret be handling our account?" I knew their children's names, their business challenges, their long-term goals. I had turned marketing from a transactional service into trusted partnerships that lasted for years. By the time I turned 55, I had earned my place at the top. The creative director position had been dangled in front of me for 3 years, always with the promise of next quarter or after this big project. I had been unofficially doing the job for years anyway, managing the creative team, developing campaign strategies, presenting to the biggest clients. So when the official position finally opened up, I wasn't worried. This was my moment. 20 years of loyalty, proven results, and deep industry relationships. I had built the department from scratch, mentored every junior employee, and generated millions in revenue for the company. The morning of my interview, I put on my best navy suit, the one I'd bought to celebrate my biggest client win the year before. I walked into that conference room with my portfolio of successful campaigns, my list of client testimonials, and 20 years of confidence. Sitting across from me were CEO Richard Peterson, HR Director Linda, and 2 board members I'd worked with for over a decade. These people had seen me transform their company. They had watched me turn around failing campaigns, rescue difficult client relationships, and train the next generation of marketers. "Margaret," Richard began, his voice carrying an uncomfortable formality I'd never heard before, "we want to thank you for your interest in the creative director position. Your experience and dedication to Peterson have been remarkable." The pause after "remarkable" should have been my first warning sign. However, he continued, avoiding direct eye contact, "We've decided to go in a different direction. The marketing landscape is changing rapidly, and we need someone who brings fresh energy, digital native thinking, and an understanding of modern consumer behavior." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my professional composure. "Richard, I've been leading our digital transformation for the past 5 years. Our social media campaigns have won 3 industry awards, and our online conversion rates." "We appreciate everything you've done, Margaret," Linda interrupted smoothly, "but we've decided to offer the position to Brad Morrison. He's a digital marketing specialist with an MBA from Northwestern and some really innovative ideas about where the industry is heading." Brad Morrison. I knew exactly who he was. 28 years old, hired 6 months earlier as a digital strategy consultant. He had an expensive haircut, designer sneakers, and the kind of confident swagger that comes from never having experienced real failure. He spoke in buzzwords about disrupting traditional paradigms and leveraging synergistic solutions, but I had yet to see him deliver a single successful campaign. "I see," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "And what role do you envision for me going forward?" Richard's relief was visible as he moved into what was clearly a rehearsed explanation. We're creating a new position for you, senior consultant. You'll be able to focus on what you do best, client relationships and strategic oversight. Of course, there will be some salary adjustment to reflect the new responsibilities. Salary adjustment. A pay cut. After 20 years of building their company, they were demoting me and cutting my pay to make room for a kid who probably spent more on his monthly student loan payments than I made in bonuses. The transition will be seamless, Linda added with false enthusiasm. Brad will be taking over your current projects, and you'll be there to support him with your institutional knowledge. Support him. With my institutional knowledge. I was being turned into a training manual for my own replacement. I left that meeting with my dignity intact and my heart shattered. That afternoon, I watched Brad move into what should have been my office, the corner space with the city view that I had been promised for 3 years. He immediately started rearranging furniture and hanging his Northwestern diploma on the wall where my industry awards had been displayed. But Ray, the real humiliation was just beginning. Brad didn't just take my job, he set out to systematically erase any evidence that I had ever mattered at Peterson Marketing. In our first team meeting under his leadership, he announced his fresh vision for the department. We're going to revolutionize how Peterson approaches marketing, he declared, standing at the head of the conference table where I had run meetings for the past 8 years. No more old-school thinking. No more playing it safe with outdated strategies. We're going to embrace innovation and show our clients what modern marketing really looks like. Every suggestion I made was dismissed as traditional thinking or how we used to do things. When I tried to share insights from my client relationships, Brad would cut me off with comments like, "Thanks, Margaret, but I think we need perspectives from this decade." The worst part? He started taking credit for campaigns I had designed. The Riverside Bank rebranding that had taken me 6 months to develop suddenly became Brad's vision for modernizing financial marketing. The tourism campaign for the city that had won a regional award was now an example of Brad's innovative approach to destination marketing. When I tried to correct the record, Brad would smile condescendingly and say, "Margaret, I think you're remembering it differently. This campaign required digital expertise that wasn't really part of your skill set." It wasn't just the stolen credit that hurt, it was watching him butcher the execution. Brad understood the theory of digital marketing, but he had no idea how to build genuine relationships with clients or how to adapt strategies when reality didn't match the textbook. The Henderson Industries campaign was a perfect example. This was a client I had worked with for 12 years, building their brand from a local manufacturer to a regional leader. I knew their CEO, their budget constraints, their company culture, and exactly how to position their products in the market. Brad decided to modernize their approach with what he called a disruptive social media strategy that ignored everything I knew about their target demographic. When I tried to explain that Henderson's customers were primarily B2B decision-makers who valued relationship building over viral content, Brad literally rolled his eyes. "Margaret, you're thinking like it's still 1995, he said in front of the entire team. "Social media is where all marketing is heading. If you can't adapt to modern strategies, maybe you should consider whether this industry is still right for you." The campaign was a disaster. Henderson's CEO called me directly, confused about why their messaging had suddenly shifted away from the relationship-focused approach that had been working for over a decade. I had to apologize for strategies I hadn't designed and explain changes I hadn't approved. But when I tried to address this with Brad, he blamed me for not properly briefing him on the client's outdated preferences. The breaking point came during the quarterly client review meeting. Morrison Industries, our biggest account, worth $2.4 million annually, was presenting their feedback on our recent campaigns. I had been managing this relationship for 15 years. Their CEO, Janet Morrison, had specifically requested that I lead the presentation. The night before the meeting, Brad called me at home. "Margaret, I've been thinking about tomorrow's presentation." His voice carried that tone of false concern that I had learned to dread. "I think it might be better if I take the lead on this one. You've been seeming a bit overwhelmed lately, and I want to make sure we put our best foot forward with Morrison." "Brad, Janet specifically asked for me to present. She's been my client for 15 years. I know exactly what she's looking for." "Right, But that's exactly the problem, he said, his patience clearly wearing thin. Your relationship with Janet is too personal, too informal. She needs to see Peterson as a modern, professional organization, not a place where business gets done based on old friendships. My relationship with Janet has generated over $30 million in revenue for this company. And I appreciate that, Margaret. I really do. But we need to think about the future, not just rest on past successes. I'll handle the presentation, and you can be there for support if needed. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find the conference room already set up with Brad's materials. My presentation, the one I had spent 2 weeks preparing, incorporating 15 years of knowledge about Morrison Industries, had been replaced with a generic pitch deck full of marketing jargon and industry buzzwords. When Janet arrived with her team, she looked around the room with obvious confusion. "Where's Margaret? I thought she was presenting today." Brad stepped forward with his most professional smile. "Janet, great to see you again." Margaret has stepped back from active presentation duties to focus on strategic oversight. "I'll be walking you through our recommendations today." I watched Janet's expression shift from confusion to disappointment to barely concealed irritation as Brad launched into a presentation that treated her like a stranger instead of a longtime partner. He mispronounced the names of her key products, misunderstood her target market, and proposed strategies that ignored everything I had taught him about her company's values and culture. Halfway through the presentation, Janet stopped him. "I'm sorry, but this doesn't seem like the Peterson Marketing I've been working with for 15 years. Where's the personal understanding of our business? Where's the strategic insight I've come to expect?" Brad's confident smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. This represents Peterson's evolution toward data-driven, modern marketing strategies. We're moving beyond relationship-based approaches toward measurable, scalable solutions. Janet looked directly at me for the first time since the meeting started. "Margaret, is this really the direction Peterson is heading?" I felt every eye in the room on me. This was the moment where I could have spoken up, could have fought for what I knew was right. Instead, I made the biggest mistake of my professional life. "Brad is leading our creative direction now," I said quietly. "This is his vision for modern marketing." Janet's disappointment was palpable. "I see. Well, this certainly is different from what we've experienced with Peterson in the past." The meeting ended 15 minutes early with vague promises to review the materials and get back to us. Janet left without scheduling a follow-up meeting for the first time in 15 years. That afternoon, Linda from HR knocked on my cubicle. Yes, I had been moved from my office to a cubicle in the consultant area. "Margaret, can I see you for a moment?" In her office, Linda sat behind her desk with a folder that I somehow knew contained bad news. "I wanted to follow up on your transition to the senior consultant role," she began, using the same carefully neutral tone she had perfected for difficult conversations. "We've been observing your adjustment to the new team structure, and there are some concerns about how you're adapting to Brad's leadership style." "Concerns?" "Brad has mentioned that you seem resistant to new ideas and strategies. He feels that your experience, while valuable, might be making it difficult for you to embrace the changes necessary for Peterson's future growth." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "Linda, I've been nothing but professional. I've supported every decision, even when I disagreed with the strategy. I understand this transition is difficult," she continued, "but Brad is the creative director now, and his vision needs to be supported fully by the entire team. If you're having trouble adjusting to a supporting role after so many years of leadership, that's understandable. Many people in your situation find that early retirement can be a positive next step." Early retirement. At 55. After building their company from scratch. "We could discuss a very generous severance package," Linda added when I didn't respond immediately. "Something that would give you time to explore other opportunities or simply enjoy some well-deserved rest." I walked out of that meeting feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my professional life. 20 years of loyalty, expertise, and results had been reduced to a situation that needed to be managed with early retirement. But Ray, sometimes your lowest moment becomes the catalyst for your greatest transformation. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine and my laptop, reading through 20 years of emails, client testimonials, and project files. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started to see the situation clearly. Peterson Marketing hadn't just demoted me, they had gutted their own competitive advantage. I wasn't just an experienced employee, I was the repository of institutional knowledge that couldn't be replaced by youth and energy. Every major client relationship, every successful campaign strategy, every vendor partnership, they all existed because of relationships I had built and maintained. Brad might have my title, but he didn't have my expertise. More importantly, he didn't have my relationships. I started making a list. Every client who had specifically requested to work with me. Every vendor who gave Peterson preferential pricing because of our long-term partnership. Every successful campaign that had been built on insights that couldn't be found in any marketing textbook. Then I made another list. Every talented employee who had expressed frustration with Brad's leadership. Every client who seemed confused or disappointed by Peterson's new direction. Every competitor who had tried to recruit me over the years. By the time I finished that second bottle of wine, I had the beginning of a plan. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Instead of going to Peterson, I drove to a coffee shop across town and opened my laptop. I started with research. What would it take to start my own marketing agency? What were the legal requirements, the financial considerations, the logistical challenges? I spent the entire day reading everything I could find about entrepreneurship, business formation, and competitive strategy. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a master of strategic intelligence gathering. I started having casual conversations with clients, vendors, and colleagues not to recruit them, but to understand their true feelings about Peterson's new direction. What I discovered was even better than I had hoped. Janet Morrison wasn't the only client confused by Peterson's sudden shift. The regional hospital system was frustrated by campaigns that ignored their community-focused values. The local university was disappointed by marketing strategies that failed to understand their unique position in higher education. Client after client expressed confusion about why Peterson no longer seemed to get their business. The talented employees were equally frustrated. Sarah, our best graphic designer, had been repeatedly overruled by Brad's preference for trendy designs that ignored client preferences. Mike, our senior account manager, had watched 2 long-term clients express dissatisfaction with their new point of contact. Lisa, our media buyer, had been forced to work with vendors who offered kickbacks instead of the quality partners she had cultivated for years. Most importantly, I realized that Peterson's success had always been built on something that couldn't be easily replicated: deep, personal relationships with clients who valued expertise over innovation for its own sake. I started testing the waters. During a client lunch with the regional bank president, I casually mentioned that I was exploring some new opportunities. His immediate response: "If you ever start your own agency, Margaret, we'd be very interested in working with you." The response was the same everywhere I went. Clients weren't loyal to Peterson Marketing, they were loyal to me. They valued my understanding of their business, my track record of results, and my commitment to their success over flashy presentations and marketing buzzwords. That's when I realized I wasn't just planning an exit strategy, I was planning a hostile takeover of my own career. I formed an LLC, found office space, and started reaching out to the employees who had expressed frustration with Brad's leadership. I wasn't recruiting them yet. I was simply letting them know that alternatives might be available soon. The timing had to be perfect. Peterson's biggest clients were all coming up for contract renewal in the next 6 months, and pitch season was about to begin. This was when agencies lived or died, when relationships and expertise mattered more than trendy offices and expensive equipment. On a Friday afternoon in March, exactly 6 months after Brad had taken my job, I walked into Peterson Marketing for the last time. I had timed my resignation letter perfectly. Monday morning was the start of pitch season, when Brad would need all the institutional knowledge and client relationships he had spent 6 months dismissing as outdated. "Richard," I said, placing my resignation letter on his desk, "I wanted to thank you for 20 years of opportunities at Peterson. I've decided to pursue a new direction in my career." His face went pale as he read the letter. "Margaret, this is very sudden. Can we discuss this? I'm sure we can work out any concerns you might have about your current role." There's nothing to work out, I replied calmly. I've learned a lot about modern marketing strategies over the past 6 months, and I'm excited to apply those lessons in a new environment. But pitch season is starting Monday. We need your client knowledge, your relationships. I'm sure Brad's digital native thinking will serve you well, I interrupted. After all, relationship-based marketing is so yesterday. I cleaned out my cubicle while Richard frantically tried to reach board members and Linda scrambled to understand the legal implications of my departure. By 5 o'clock, I was walking out of Peterson Marketing with my personal belongings and 20 years of professional relationships that couldn't be replaced by energy drinks and PowerPoint presentations. Monday morning, I opened the doors of Vintage Wisdom Marketing with a team of 5 former Peterson employees and 3 confirmed clients ready to sign contracts. Our slogan said everything Peterson needed to know: experience never goes out of style. Within 6 weeks, we had signed contracts with 7 former Peterson clients, including Morrison Industries and the regional hospital system. Janet Morrison's first comment in our kickoff meeting: "It's so good to be working with someone who actually understands our business again." Brad's incompetence became impossible to hide once he lost access to my strategic insights and client relationships. The Henderson Industries account was canceled after their campaign failed to generate a single qualified lead. The university pulled their account when Brad's team designed marketing materials that completely misrepresented their academic programs. Most devastatingly for Peterson, they lost 3 major pitches in a row, pitches they had been favored to win based on relationships I had built over 2 decades. Without my insights into client needs and industry knowledge, Brad's presentations were generic, tone-deaf, and easily beaten by agencies that actually understood the prospects' businesses. 6 months after I left Peterson, they had lost 70% of their major accounts. Richard called me personally, offering to double my old salary if I would return as creative director. I politely declined, explaining that I was too busy running the fastest-growing marketing agency in the region. Brad lasted exactly 11 months in the position he had been perfect for. He was quietly let go after a client meeting where he pitched a social media strategy to a B2B manufacturing company that had specifically requested traditional trade publication advertising. The final vindication came a year later when Regional Business Magazine featured me on their cover with the headline, "The Entrepreneur Who Proved Age is Just a Number." The article detailed how Vintage Wisdom Marketing had disrupted the local industry by proving that experience and relationships still mattered more than youth and buzzwords. Peterson Marketing never recovered. They eventually sold to a larger agency for a fraction of their former value, and Richard retired early with his reputation permanently damaged by the catastrophic decision to replace proven expertise with untested potential. As for me, at 57, I'm running a thriving agency with 25 employees and a client list that keeps growing. My daughter, now 35, works as our director of digital strategy, proving that the best way to embrace innovation is to combine it with wisdom earned through experience. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the push you needed to discover what you're truly capable of achieving. Peterson didn't just underestimate me, they freed me to prove them catastrophically wrong. Age discrimination is real, Ray, but so is the power of experience, relationships, and strategic thinking. They thought they were getting rid of an outdated employee, but they actually created their most formidable competitor. If this story inspired you to believe that experience never goes out of style, hit that like button and subscribe to Letters to Ray for more confessions that prove wisdom beats youth every time. Share this with anyone who's ever been told they're too old, too experienced, or yesterday's news. Tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying career comeback you've ever witnessed? Until next time, remember, sometimes the best response to being underestimated is proving them spectacularly wrong.